Favorite? It'd have to go Garth Brooks.
Which Garth Brooks song?
What's the...
Is that Damned Old Rodeo?
No, this is old
That's
90s.
my favorite.
3:30 in the morning.
Blame it all on my roots.
Blame it all on my roots.
What is that? What's the
I
name
showed
of that
up
song?
in boots. Gosh, what's the name of that song? All my friends. No.
Oh, Low Places.
Low
Friends in
Places. Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Wow.
Do you have friends in low places? Surely, because you're here.
Hey, welcome to Pints and Perspectives. There's 3 of us today, and that was
First time. This is the first time on Pints Perspectives where we have 3 guests.
Yeah. So
Or three people on the show.
3 people on the show. So this is Dr. Benjamin Blackwell. What are your credentials? Say your credentials. I should have done a bio.
Teach New Testament theology at Houston Christian, or at least formerly.
The high school?
Yes.
Houston Christian High School? Oh, the university.
Junior high.
The artist formerly known as Houston Baptist University.
Yes, that's right. So, and I direct Houston Theological Seminary.
Okay, yeah. And
PhD from Durham,
Yep.
Master's in Divinity and Accounting
Yes.
as well, and undergrads in both as well.
close personal friend of Tom Wright.
Yeah, well,
Weird.
yes.
As close as that, I don't know.
You worked for him?
He does respond to my emails, so I guess.
Well,
There you go.
he
Hey,
doesn't. He doesn't respond to mine. So there you
how many times have you emailed him?
go. I don't know. Never. Tom Wright.
So there we go. I think both of us could say Ben has been extremely influential in both of our lives in ways that we can't begin to quantify.
During my undergraduate program, I took more class hours with Ben than any other professor. It was like 21 hours.
Yeah, see, I would normally say that was true for me, but I think I had equal with Brookins just because I had so many language classes. I had so many Greek and Latin classes.
Yeah, I like to say that Ben Blackwell started my liberalization.
Yeah, started.
I don't know if that's... You appreciate that title? I mean...
I'm happy to make people open to wider perspectives.
Hey, well, you're on the right podcast for that.
I'll let somebody else take the blame for making you actually liberal.
No, that's it, man. Higher education creates critical thinking skills and opens your worldview to other perspectives, right?
Yeah, of course.
So, goal achieved. Okay, let's drink some beer. So Ben did his PhD in the UK and is soon to move back to the UK. Where are you moving to again? Some town.
Cheltenham is the British way. Well,
Cheltenham. It feels like there's too many consonants next to one another.
They go in together, but it's in Western England near Wales, so Bristol-ish.
Okay. Do you speak any Welsh?
No.
Is there a lot of like language overlap?
Welsh people all speak English, but there is a resurgence of learning Welsh.
Yeah, because down with colonization and the monarchy, right?
Yes.
So do you have to pledge fealty to King Charles?
I don't think so.
Okay. You just have to use money with his face on it.
I did have to agree not to be a terrorist or somebody that destabilizes the British government to get my visa.
Huh.
So,
okay, so you won't be joining their conservative party then, because that's what they're doing over there, right?
Yeah, they didn't do too well in their last election.
Right.
Regional, but
well, Sunak seemed...
Well, they have parliament, right?
yeah.
Yes.
I think that system is far and away better to adequately represent people in the way that they can form alliances and allegiances.
Yeah, but they yell at each other the whole time. Yeah.
They do, but that's how you actually get people to represent, because, once the highest party tries to make their alliance, if they're unsuccessful, it goes to the next one, and then they can make an alliance to become the way to actually get it. I think it promotes progress and actually getting something done in the way they allow those allegiances.
Yeah, I guess so. They have like 600 MPs for
not that many
the UK.
people. Yeah.
So they have
it's too many.
A quarter of our population, but twice as many representatives.
Yeah.
So,
it's too many cooks in the kitchen.
But that does mean then that the there's not the simple bifurcation. Of course,
Right.
they have three main parties anyway, the Liberal
Right.
Democrats between the Labor and Tories. But
Right.
it does mean people settle out into subgroups.
They've also had like 4 prime ministers in 6 months. But Volodymyr Zelensky was just there meeting with, what's his name? Sunak. Okay, enough about the
Politics.
UK.
Yes.
But the reason why I brought that up is because Ben was in the UK and is moving to the UK, so you have an appreciation for beer. Or no?
It is probably underdeveloped based on that. People in England think I like the cheapest beer there, so that tells you.
Okay. What is the cheapest beer there?
Carlsberg.
Oh, yes, I've had it. Interesting.
It's an import here, so it
Right.
it's cheap.
Have you only had it here?
That's
Yeah.
Well, then you can't judge its flavor.
Yeah,
'cause
no,
it changes
true.
coming across.
It's
the
got to be
pond.
different. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, we're gonna drink this beer, and it's not from the UK. It's from Texas.
Yeah, so we actually have 3 beers, all from the same brewery, Paradigm Brewing, and they're actually in Tomball, Texas.
I think it's pronounced Paradigm. Hey. I don't know why that's so funny to everyone.
I have the Precision IPA. These are all from the same brewery, and their website says they're all from the Core Series.
Okay.
Core Series or Core lineup. These beers are part of our core brews that we are offering to the market, whether you're at the Paradigm Brewery or in your local grocery store or market. Ask for one of these core brews by name.
Cool.
So I have the Precision IPA. It's 7%
Really?
ABV,
Okay.
and it's somewhere around 70 IBUs. They have this really nice IBU dial gauge.
Good art.
Somewhere around 70 IBUs. Its description says, inspired by old school American IPAs. This brew offers a clean and classic light malt flavor that highlights the star of the show, the hops. So you think about this should be a New England style IPA, if I had to guess.
Yep. I've got the Unforgettable Blonde Ale. That was it. You're supposed to do it into the microphone. Featuring Vienna malt and German hops. Unforgotten. That's the name of it. Sorry, Unforgotten. Delivers a smooth, drinkable experience, but the real story behind this brew is our heroes. First responders, police, and our military. See, it has this American flag, this tattered American flag on it, which I was going to say something about, but now I feel like I can't. We honor their efforts and sacrifices to keep us safe, and a portion of the proceeds from every beer goes to help support them. Enjoy the drinkability of this premium craft beer, and know you are helping to make a difference. Well, there you go. Now I feel great about drinking this beer. 4.5 alcohol by volume, 12 ounces in a can. Ben, what are you drinking over there?
Do you typically like blondes?
No. I mean, I'm married. I'm married to one.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, look, I have that button. Oh, no, wrong button. Where's the... There it is. Okay. Ben, what are you drinking over there? We gave him this one on purpose. What's it called?
The Professor Pills.
Yeah, you do.
You know, when it's low-hanging fruit, sometimes you just got to pick it.
There it is.
It's got the... I guess it's got an even more robust picture of a mustache from what's his face, the football coach guy.
What are you talking about? Who has a mustache?
What's his name?
Football coach guy.
The Bears?
Ted Lasso.
Oh, Ted Lasso. Oh, he was using football in the British sense.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So,
So funny.
Ben does not have any facial hair.
Yes, no, I can't grow.
Go to YouTube.
Good.
Look
it
at it.
is thin and
Me too.
impressive.
Me too. We can't all be Cullen, so that's okay.
Well,
Let me read the description for you. A classic German Pilsner from our brewmaster, who is a professor of brewery operations and management at a major Texas university. Which one's that? Packed with honey and floral malt notes, this beer delivers classic hop notes in every sip. There is a special drinkability that comes from the long aging and lagering process that makes this beer melt in your mouth. Class is in session. 5.5% alcohol by volume. How's that make you feel? What do you think about
It's good.
Pilsners?
I'm a Pilsner fan.
Well, that's great. All right. Sorry. It's going to splash.
you are always so timid when you open your beer.
I don't like it to splash on my computer. You all right over there, Ben?
Computer.
You been drinking?
Computer, he says.
All right. What are you tasting? What are you smelling? What are you doing? What are you living? What are you rating?
I think I'm kind of stopped up because I'm struggling to smell it. It's not super. The smell's not super pungent on mine. It's a classic New England style IPA. The fun fact: anybody know how the IPA was invented?
Yeah.
How?
The British were sending beer to India, and
No.
it kept spoiling.
No,
So they overhopped it.
See, this is what happens when we bring amateur hour in.
India Pale Ale.
No, it's because they were trying to bring beer over from England
That's what I just
along
said.
the India trading route to America, and they added hops to it
Preservative.
to make it a
Okay, sorry, I
better
got one
preservative.
detail of the freaking story
It
wrong.
certainly wasn't going to India. my
Okay,
guy.
well, it was on the what trail?
The India
Thank
trading
you.
company. Yes, because that's where we
Does
send
that trail-
coffee and
does-
tea to India
Does
too.
that trail
huh?
cross India? Thank you. And the crowd goes wild.
Ben coming in with the key sound effect. Okay. Mine tastes like a pretty classic New England style IPA. The hops are pretty mild.
Yeah, what's-
70 IBUs is
70.
misleading.
I was going to say 70 is...
Yeah, it's a little misleading. Doesn't coat my mouth the way you would expect something that high in IBUs to leave you with that super, super pungent bitter flavor. 7.1.
What do
Yeah,
you
it's pretty
think?
decent.
7.1, that's quite the rating. What do you think the innovative techniques and technologies are that they reference?
I don't know. I was trying to read more about them, and they make, not to poo-poo on anybody, but they make some pretty outlandish claims, and they don't back them up in any kind of researched way or tell you why they're making those claims.
Do they not cite their sources?
They don't.
Where's the
Dr. Blackwell would be appalled at some of this writing.
Can I see the bibliography?
Yeah. So, I'm not real sure. And then again, maybe they just had Chat GPT write all this with fancy words and
Maybe.
attention getters.
Are you using ChatGPT as a professor at all?
I did. I asked it, what is the main theme of Matthew's gospel?
Okay. Did it get it right?
It talked about the kingdom of God,
Well, there you go.
and it explained it pretty well.
Predictive text.
It did not do as well when I asked the same question about Gospel of Luke. So
Oh, interesting. Okay. Didn't do as well. It didn't fit your hermeneutic expectations.
What did it say? Because if you were going to ask me, I'd be like, the main theme is the marginalized. Jesus, the king of the marginalized.
well, in that sense, like it does start with Jesus' identity and the kingdom as the way to address the problem of the marginalized.
Yeah.
So you're preaching
there
the
you
good
go.
news to the poor, right? And so what is the gospel? Jesus is the Messiah who's bringing in that kingdom.
And it didn't.
And you
get anywhere
disagree with
close to
that. You don't believe any of that.
Yeah, it didn't get it as sharply as it did.
Oh.
on
Okay.
Matthew.
Okay. Well,
I mean, I only asked it once, so I guess I
Well,
I
and
cared enough
it can do better if you prompt it well.
Yeah, you tell
right?
us.
The prompts are key on it.
This beer is Unforgotten, and I will probably forget it. It's not great. It is 4 points.
What's your favorite kind of blonde? Just so I know what you're.
I don't have
You like
a-
the bombshell blonde?
That's like the only one I can. That's from Southern Star, also here in Texas. That's the
Yeah.
only one I can even think of. I mean,
What about
I'm
the
not,
Shiner blonde?
I am not a fan. But
Maybe
look,
you just don't really like blondes.
I mean, Krista, baby, boo boo, it's all good. But look, it's good. I got to be honest. They do deliver. It is very smooth. I'll give them that. The Vienna malt and German hops is just like not flavors. But yeah, I mean, it's a good, easy drinker. I could probably have some tacos or some, crawfish or something spicy, and it would be nice and refreshing. I give it a middle of the road 5.
There you go.
Nice.
Ben, how you feeling about your pills? Your Professor pills?
Yeah, it's smooth, but not like, again, nothing memorable here.
Yeah.
So,
Well, apparently there's a special drinkability that comes from the long aging and lagering process that makes this beer melt in your mouth. Would you agree?
But they didn't cite their source. So.
yes.
Or tell us what that special drinkability
I
is.
don't know. I mean, it says here that it's supposed to be honey and floral malt notes. I'm not sure, but it was at least. I mean, I would say it's smooth. I mean, it's not one that I would avoid.
Okay.
May not be one that I seek out. So I give about 6.5.
Okay, wow. 6.5.
I wish I had the 4 6s pills for him. So I went to go get it.
And it wasn't there.
Well, they didn't have them broken down into the make your own 6-pack. So I would have had to buy a whole 6-pack, and I didn't want to do that.
Yeah, no, ain't nobody got time for that.
Well, I already had to buy a 6-pack of singles just to have enough beer for the day.
Do you ever wear a monocle? There's a monocle on that beer. Okay.
Have you ever considered wearing a fake mustache and a monocle for your new for your new attire in England?
If you just show up in the UK dressed like that.
If you just start that way, nobody knows you never did except the people that hired you.
I was thinking about getting a Harry Potter robe to lecture in.
Of course.
Oh, yes.
Do you have to wear a fancy hat to lecture in England?
In Durham, there was only one last holdout because it used to lecture in it was an open robe. It wasn't a choir robe.
Yeah.
You would wear black robes to formal dinners.
Really?
In the colleges, yeah.
Huh.
So you is a way to kind of mark out you're doing something different.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Well, I guess they they do things different across the pond, don't they? All right. Well,
apparently
it is colder there, so it makes sense that you wear robes more.
More robes.
I guess so.
Layers.
Yeah.
They say layers.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ben, you're here for a very specific reason, one that I'm very excited about.
Adam is the one that initially.
This was my idea.
Yeah.
Because I almost called you Clayton. Bringing back Clayton. Cullen tested whether or not I was a heretic based on a reading through of the Nicene Creed. And if you watch that episode, you can go back and find it. But if you watch that episode, you'll remember.
The YouTube version. It's better.
The YouTube version's better, but you'll remember that I complained about the fact that there was this professor that forced us to memorize the Nicene Creed like over and over again every semester. It's him.
It's him.
So go ahead and recite it. Go ahead and recite it for us.
You're welcome. I pledge allegiance.
And there he is.
Okay. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth and all things visible and invisible. Anyways, so we walked through that, and unfortunately, I'm sad to say that I didn't necessarily agree with everything in there. Maybe the biggest one and the easiest one is the virgin birth, which is in there. So apparently, though, Cullen has no problem with anything in the Nicene Creed.
Well, okay. I personally believe that I affirm the Nicene Creed. But you might be able to get me on the clause Father Almighty.
Okay.
Because I am definitely given over, like, I believe in concept that God began as Father Almighty. But I definitely have like a Jürgen Moltmann voluntary self-limitation of God's power. And so I wouldn't say that God sits today almighty, but God has the capacity of being almighty maybe, and definitely in a way that there will come a time where God will pick that power back up to end the war against evil. Am I a heretic because of that?
Yeah, what do you think? He doesn't think God is omnipotent.
Yeah, that's. I mean, any form of Arminianism
is heresy.
Is well,
so 70% of Western Christians are heretics.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It's your version of that is upon a spectrum of which is already God is actively partnering with humanity in a way that is not meticulously
almighty.
Yes, providential over every action they do.
I guess we have to read almighty. There's degrees to almighty. There's degrees to interpreting how much almightiness God has.
Yeah, in that sense, because I don't think you're actually negating God as almighty. You're just saying, how is God expressing his almighty authority?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which you would agree with.
Yeah, in some ways. So the way I kind of look at it is like, the Old Testament gives us a picture of a God that is all-powerful and like really, really invested in humanity and therefore really passionate about humanity. And that collision of that power and that passion it collides into some really, really terrible things in the name of God in the Old Testament.
Like what? Name one.
Conquest.
Yeah, colonization.
Yeah,
genocide. Let's use genocide.
Yeah,
genocide.
that's a great one.
Yeah,
and so like for me, I kind of think that like that self-limitation of God happens at Jesus when we see a powerless, for lack of a better term, figure come and exemplify the epitome of power on the cross
Jesus,
and conquering of evil.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of lays it down. And I would, for proof text, I would point to like Philippians 2.
Yeah, so I'd say what my only minor critique of that is that the nonviolence takes a lot of power in the sense of you to not respond in a way of the flesh, to respond evil versus evil.
Yeah,
takes an extreme amount of spiritual power.
But God didn't do it before.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's the qualitative nature of the distinction of God's judgment in the Old Testament and the New Testament. I think the New Testament is actually much stronger. Like the hell language, like the nature of punishment described in the New Testament is of a greater quantity and quality, I think, than the Old Testament. The only thing that allows us to feel less intense about that is that it's put off to the future rather
than being experienced now.
Yes.
Yeah, because one is theoretical, the other one is like actual dead babies on the ground. Genocide.
Well, it's not theoretical. It's just materialized versus immaterialized.
Yeah, well, it's just
immaterial being theoretical, right? I mean, because
it's not theoretical.
You're talking about hell. You're talking about eternal torment in hell.
Yeah, whatever the nature of that is. I mean,
right, which we don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. But you don't have to have prescribed the specific nature of it to know that there is something that is
punitive.
Yes, negative about it.
Yeah,
extremely negative.
So
right?
Would you say that punitive in that way must mean some kind of like eternal conscious torment?
Look, you're getting into the next episode topic. But okay, no, I got you.
The next one's about atonement, so I guess in some ways it kind of is.
I don't think that's a necessity.
Okay.
Well, the Nicene Creed certainly doesn't seem to think so.
Well, then what makes it so much more grievous or so much more intense than the Old Testament, like actual experience of?
Well, I guess in that sense, but it is ultimate there, because even in the Old Testament, there's hints of some afterlife that may or may not be qualified in the same way as the judgment that's experienced. Whereas whatever this is, it's ultimate.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
Okay, so I know you're not the most adept in your contemporary theology, that you're a church historian and patristics.
Well, you're just going to call him out like that, huh?
Because he would do it. He's done it before on these podcasts. When I tried to talk about the social gospel on our episode about the kingdom of God, he was like, yeah, my contemporary theology is not my best.
Okay. All right. Well,
hadn't been dead long enough to be tested by time.
Got it.
He said, death is the real tester of how good your work is.
Is that how you feel about your own work?
Not when those book sales are coming in.
Yeah, feel free to plug a few publications while we're here. Anyways.
Okay, so surely you know who Paul Tillich is in this concept of the ground of being.
Do you know who Paul Tillich is?
Yes, he knows who Paul Tillich is.
I've heard of this person.
So I don't love Paul's total concept, and I really don't love where he takes it and its ending place. But the initial construct of this like energetic ground of being the source of divinity, right? Okay, so I like that concept. I get that. That makes total sense to me. And I still believe that God is in some ways I say cause of creation. Because I don't believe in some kind of ex nihilo creation, I don't think. And so what I have done to help alleviate the problem of evil
That's a great way to put it.
And it's all, it's from a reading of scripture, but I've created a ground of death.
He created a yin to the yang.
Okay.
Yeah. I created a ground of death that what I believe the Old Testament authors communicate some truth to in storytelling form to be what we call the deep or the sea, the thing that they were afraid of a lot in the Old Testament, and what appeared to be present when God happened upon the water. Because God doesn't make the water. At least the story doesn't tell us that God makes the water in Genesis 1. God creates land. God creates light to light up what they can see. But God separates the waters.
Heretic, right?
The deep to create land and bring forth life. And you said, well, water is a great metaphor throughout the Bible, right? Baptism and purification and cleansing and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, but it's not the deep. It's not salt water, which is good for absolutely nothing except to cool the earth. And so, yes,
And to get salt.
I've created this kind of dichotomy of which I believe has happened a lot of different ways, but even in the way that the Satan character has evolved, right? When we first really see this character chronologically, we would probably say the earliest is in the book of Job, right? And the best way I could say it is like that character seems to be on God's payroll. Like they're on God's side. They answer to God.
You know, when you, there's this in the U.S., if you need a lawyer, you get a public defender.
That's right.
Well, he's the public accuser, right?
The public accuser.
Yeah.
In the Job story.
Yes.
In the Job story. Well, and the only thing that remains true about the Hasatan character throughout the biblical story, both old and new, is some concept of temptation.
Okay.
Tempting. I mean, nothing else. I mean, in Job, he's the arbiter of faithfulness, arbiter of righteousness. He's seeking out testing of the faithfulness of Job. Well, when we see him tempt Jesus, right, in Luke's gospel, it's the tempting and testing. And so that Satan character isn't, I don't believe we should view as like the embodiment of evil necessarily. And so that kind of took that role out. And so, yeah, all of these things put together, and we did it was like 11-part series on the problem of evil. And through it, I came up with this kind of concept of the ground of death. So, yeah, because of this and my creation of this ground of death character being pre-existent but clearly inferior to ground of being, Adam thinks I'm a heretic.
Okay, hold on.
Yes.
Do you want to respond? Because, go ahead.
Well,
go ahead.
You know, so there's two ways to talk about the problem of evil.
Okay, let's do this.
There's one as an active agent, and then there's one as the privation of good.
Okay.
And so in that sense, so Augustine would say like evil doesn't really exist. It's actually non-existence.
Like a darkness is the absence of light kind of thing?
Yeah, that in that sense. And so it's a corruption to the extent that it is existing, that you experience it. It's only a corruption of the good. You can only experience evil after good exists.
What causes that corruption?
In that sense, it would be volitional agency, right?
So human choice.
Well, or angelic, right? In that sense, that any personal agent would be able to then act in such a way to corrupt or the good. Now, the other option here, and I guess this is the question I have for you then, is this sense of if you have the active agency or the active presence of evil as a pre-existing, or where is there an origin to this?
This is the question.
Well, is there an origin to God?
This is the question.
Because that's my question. If there's no origin to God, why do I have to have an origin for evil?
What's the first unmoved mover of evil? That's my question.
My argument is, and in some ways, depending on how you want to structure the whole thing, well, yeah.
He would say that his ground of death versus ground of being concept, good versus evil, that they're both pre-existent.
Yeah.
Pre-existent.
Like they're counterparts to the same coin, good and evil. And in the same way that, like Isaiah, sure says that God created ex nihilo, but Genesis doesn't say that. Genesis says that God happened upon something, made some light to see what it was, and then separated what they found and created something inhabitable. And that's why the Talmud would say that when they looked at God as creator, God made order out of chaos, right? God didn't necessarily ex nihilo creation is not the only way the ancient world viewed the creation story.
Yeah.
Right.
My only issue with that is perhaps overinterpreting, in the same way I wouldn't want to overinterpret Genesis 1 about other aspects of the literal,
how Earth came to be.
7 days, all that.
Right.
I wouldn't always want to overinterpret, or potentially, right? I mean, this is the question of like, if that is my primary source of information for that idea that something pre-existed, or eternally existed with God, then that by itself would not be sufficient, because I'm already questioning the mechanics of the way Genesis 1 is presenting that material. Now, that doesn't mean that it necessarily is something that you have to deny, or it's still a data point, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to deny that it is a data point.
But it doesn't have to be necessarily like a foundational doctrinal development data point.
It would be hard for me without verification somewhere else to make that. In the same way, like I question the way that, so evolution, like I have many other data points that when along with Genesis 1 makes me read Genesis 1 in a way that is not this progression of 7 days.
Yep.
Right.
And so in that sense, there are other data points I would say that are more specific to the nature of who God is and the nature of the world, such that when I bring that together with Genesis 1, that I would read Genesis 1 in a different way. So in that sense, like a John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word.
Got it.
And so in that sense, what exists in the beginning is the Word, not creation itself. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so in that sense, that you have these other things that would outweigh that.
So in that way, let's say we go that way, you create a very, and that's what we talked about a lot through this series, is no matter how you skin the cat, the problem of evil is not easily solved. And so if you solve one thing, you're creating another one.
Sure.
And what you've created is, in your way, God must have created evil.
Yeah, so that's the question.
And I can't have that. Like for me, lots of people can deal with a supreme, powerful God and some view of justice. I can't. I need God to be good, far and above more than I need God to be powerful. I need God to be good. I need God to be benevolent. I need God to be omnibenevolent.
Yeah, and I guess that's, I mean, I definitely understand that. Thinking here of John Barclay in his book, Paul and the Gift, talks about this as the singularity of grace, that God is singularly motivated by this benevolence, particularly is the language he uses.
Yeah. That's a great book. It's going to be incorporated into my tattoo sleeve.
Yeah, it's a good one. I
would
would
put
say,
John's face on your.
But
No,
his
I'm gonna
argument
put it in
is
present box.
he would argue that Paul does not, like Paul at least, does not perfect that grace of singularity.
Right.
And in that sense, I think that God's benevolence is definitely expressed as a primary factor. But even then, so like, and this is maybe the thing of Romans here, is that God's righteousness, his saving activity, is often carried out through other agents, forms. So the wrath of God actually is an expression of his righteousness to bring salvation. And so I in the prophets, it talks about that anytime God's wrath I see is not as destructive, it is actually for the benefit of the people. Just reading Jeremiah of late here, and so like Jeremiah.
Put it for our listeners. They're not all Bible nerds like us. Jeremiah is a prophet in the exilic period.
Oh yes,
yeah. So
Bible book.
Yeah,
he's actually in Babylon while they're in exile.
Yeah. So Jeremiah is talking about. So one of the things that God brings judgment on the people for is because they made a pact to free all their slaves, all the Hebrew slaves.
Right.
And I assume part of what motivated the Jews to free their slaves was to have a better fighting force against the Babylonians. I don't know. It doesn't explain why they made this covenant.
Yeah.
But then they reverse the covenant.
They put them back into
and
slavery.
They put them back into slavery. And so then Jeremiah comes and says, you have created this great sin, right?
Yeah.
You should have had Jubilee and this time of releasing slaves every 7 years, and you didn't. In fact, not only did you not release them, you re-enslaved them.
Yeah.
But so then God's judgment comes, the Babylonians come. And so around chapter 38, 39 is when he actually describes them coming. And then all these people that were actually the workers of the land, the owners, are exiled, and all that's left are the poor. And so he says, you've got the whole land here now to yourself. You get to take it. And so in a lot of ways, God's judgment then actually is the means by which his redemptive purposes are carried out. And so
isn't that the whole concept of restorative justice, that justice is truly pulling up those who have been oppressed rather than just trying to push down those who've been exalted?
Yeah, and so in that sense, they're not pushing down just those who have done evil, but retributive justice that way. But
right.
at the same time, so that still it answers a part of the question, but it doesn't answer why God would allow this evil to happen.
Right. Well, right.
But I do want to say that God's agency, even coming back to the benevolence issue, that when God is acting, even in ways that seem destructive to us, the purpose is always towards the telos of what we'd call justice.
Sure. Always. But okay. So here's the question. Did you want to respond back?
Well, I was going to say is, except when he tells his people to ravage whole cities and destroy them and rape their women. Deal.
So like, sure. I guess the question is like, what is God responsible for? Right.
Oh, that is such a great question.
Like, I want to ask the question.
Well, especially my question for that is, especially in the biblical story, like, am I allowed to hold God on the hook and say that, hey, like the destruction of these cities and the conquest of these people and the stealing of their land is not okay?
Yeah.
We say it for our own actions against the Native Americans. Why can't we say it for God? It's the same thing. Adam always says the Old Testament's the greatest book about...
It's the How to Colonize book.
And I always say it's the second best because Mein Kampf is the real How to Colonize.
Okay. So Bible and
Hitler's memoir. I don't think anybody looks back and goes, oh yeah, God says that's okay today. And if they do, they probably want to own some slaves.
Well, I guess some do.
Yeah, no. Look, I'm not here to necessarily vindicate that, because I think there is a sense of progressive revelation in the Bible, right?
Yeah, thank you.
But yes. I would not hold to like a Greg Boyd, Brian Zahn version of things to where the new to where it become. I mean, I just don't know how that becomes Marcionite. To be honest with you,
what if it does
become? The God of the
become
Old Testament is played off against the God of the New Testament.
It is Marcionism.
Don't put me in this category. Then you can speak for yourself, Marcionite.
I think it is Marcionism. But go ahead.
For me, I do believe in progressive revelation, and my primary hermeneutical lens that I read the scriptures through now is narrative theology, and I think it's a development of the story. Now, I say that fully needing to communicate that I think Genesis 1 through 11 is myth, and the true story of Israel begins in Genesis 12. I don't believe any of Genesis 1 through 11 is historical.
If Cullen thinks that God just chills out in his old age or is a different God.
It's not. So I heard Stephen Reed.
That makes him a Marcion and a heretic, yes?
No. What I'm
That's
really
the point of this episode.
Well, what I might end up being a heretic is for my next comment.
Okay.
Steve Reed, I heard him make a comment one time about the development of God's character and God's change throughout the biblical story.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I don't know how I fully feel about this, but one of my favorite things to contemplate is God learning how to be God. Because if we believe the traditional evangelical dispensational story, God only had slaves before that. Not really slaves, but angelic beings are not. Yeah. I mean, the Bible makes it very clear they are a different category of existence.
Are angels slaves? That's a solid question.
Well, they're not totally slaves because they can't revolt.
Well, they are his servants, right? I mean, that language, but whatever that.
Do they have
messengers,
a choice?
Apparently, that's what the Greek word means.
Yeah.
But, anyways, so, I just wonder if God had to learn how to interact with humans, and God quickly realized what kings have realized, or not so quickly realized, is that fear is not always the best motivator.
Cullen also thinks that God made mistakes in the Old Testament, like the whole genociding of cultures. God was learning, and he was like an adolescent
God
kid.
admits they made mistakes.
Okay.
I regret having made you king, Saul.
Does that make him a heretic?
So, I mean, in that sense, like the text there at least says he never says he regrets anything with regard to the conquest of Israel. You know,
It's true. It's true.
And so I wouldn't want to impute that in there. My question about Jesus, though, to what extent is he an expression of God, of Yahweh's identity? And why we call Jesus divine is because he is. Particularly the Yahweh text in the Old Testament are applied to him. So just an easy one.
Right.
Mark 1:1 says this is the beginning of the good news about Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God. And then it uses John the Baptist to talk about John the Baptist coming before Jesus. It quotes that I'm going to send a messenger in front of the Lord or Yahweh. And so John the Baptist is coming before Jesus as Yahweh incarnate. And so in that sense, like there's not a sense in the biblical narrative that Jesus is undoing something that was previously revealed. And so I wouldn't want to see this as an opposition in that way to where it was bad and now it's good.
Evolution? A progression?
Progression, I will take. Like Jesus is a revelation of Yahweh that we have never had before. Right? And so that's got to be progressive.
Right. And Yahweh looks very different than Yahweh we saw previously. Right? Like in some ways, you don't ever see Jesus tell anyone to commit violence of any regard, of any kind.
Cast the first stone.
And then when they do, he says, put your sword down.
Yeah,
what are you doing?
Yeah, so I think with this, part of this, though, is, and this is where, so Hayes' moral vision is always a classic text for me. But
I was going to say, that's what we need.
Oh, I didn't put it up here because he's not affirming.
But I mean, this is where, when he talks about Bart, this is where I think Bart is right. God is always the free agent here. God gets to choose what God does. He is the measure of everything rather than us putting him to our measure.
Yeah.
And so I think what Bart would say is it's not normative for Christians to commit violence. It's not something that we are called to do.
Okay.
But he also, I think, rightly wants to say that God could be free to tell the church to do something different.
To commit violence.
Potentially.
To January 6th.
I wouldn't say
this is the conundrum.
Potentially.
I wouldn't, but yeah, potentially.
I mean, a lot of people were praying on the Capitol floor, thanking God for access to the building because they believed that they were hearing the voice of God and that their prophets were telling them that now is the time to commit violence in the name of Yeshua to take over a corrupt government. How's that different?
Yeah, what I would say is what the test for us to be certain about that would be different than the fact that God could do it.
Okay.
What would
the test be then?
Well, look, it has not happened, and so I think this is Bart's point. It's not that God is. His whole thing is it's not normative, and so we would have to have, I think, huge amounts of evidence that it would be
the Old Testament.
The right thing to do.
How is that not normative? How is that not normative?
But
they're chopping women up in pieces for crying out loud.
And mailing it around the country.
Stories.
That's in the Bible.
Look, I'm not, but in this sense to try to defend that. But at the same time, like part of my thing is like who am I to choose an ethic of the whole reason you have that ethic is because you are pulling it out of the Bible, right?
Sure. Yes.
At one point, then I have to submit my ethic to what the text itself is leading me to. Okay. And so to the extent, if I ever come to the point where I have to absolutely say what is happening is out of character to God, then it's saying that I know more about this than the authoritative text is. And so how that works out, like I'm a 90% Anabaptist pacifist.
right. Which
and so it's like I don't know what to do with those texts.
But if God,
at the same time, for me to be hypercritical of them also gives me great discomfort.
So
right.
Okay, so what I think I hear from you is you don't see as much of the conundrum that we see, which is God's power stands in direct opposition to God's goodness.
Does it? Does God's power ever stand in direct opposition to God's goodness?
See, I think that's part of when I think of in finite terms,
Yeah.
Or scarce resources, these things have to be in opposition to one another.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when I think
Are you about to give me the C.S. Lewis, we're a line trying to explain a cube argument?
I guess it could be in that
my
realm.
Gosh, Ben.
I wasn't going to use that
you
analogy.
Might as well say Isaiah 55:8-9.
Well, no, but what I was going to say here is like who is responsible when anything happens?
Okay.
The person who caused it,
wait,
Ben.
this
That's
is
how we normally say it, right?
but
And if you want to take somebody's land,
or-
what do?
or-
We buy it.
or-
we buy it. We don't ravage and kill for
Or
it.
the person who caused, or the person who could have prevented and chose not to prevent.
Yeah, I mean, so there.
Well, I don't hold that well.
Hold on, wait.
Yeah.
But
Keep
what
going.
about that? What about this issue? Do people come to faith solely because of their own volition?
No, I would not say that.
Yeah, so there's a non-competitive view of agency there,
Well,
to
it
where
de-
God's drawing and
Can
our
you-
choice are not in opposition to one another.
Well, but can you really put it in the category of active agency in that way if God is doing it to every person?
Yeah, because he could
it's
easily be
active.
not doing it.
Yeah,
active.
I guess so. I guess so.
So in this
yeah.
sense, I just have a non-competitive view of divine and human agency in this sense, to where you can't easily separate out what we're doing and what God's agency in the world. And it's not a meticulous providence in the sense of a Calvinist, like God's forcing everybody to do it. But it's also not a libertarian free will model to where I get to choose only what I choose and God's doing his bit. And like that's another competitive form of agency.
Yeah.
And it seems, and the reason this model, when philosophers can assess it, it's incoherent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's incoherent because the finite is engaging the infinite.
Yeah.
And we don't have
Chalk it up to mystery.
well, I can affirm like that it exists, but how it exists and why.
Yeah, we've said this. We said it at almost every episode on our Problem of Evil series. Is like, no matter how you skin this cat, at some point you're gonna have to give some element of your faith to divine mystery.
That's the deal.
Because like we just truly can't explain it all.
Which for me feels like a cop-out. Okay, let me ask this.
Well, here's the question. What's a better answer?
Oh.
That God doesn't exist.
True.
That God doesn't exist. That's what Adam thinks.
It's all theoretical. That it's all an exercise in thought and of course practice, but it's all like you can't.
You've seen the feathers coming down out of the ceiling. Is that theoretical?
That's one way to put it. But there's
You've had no charismatic experiences.
I have asked him about this. How does he explain away the charismatic
There's no
experiences?
possible way for me to verify any of those experiences came from God. There's no way. I mean, I could say that everything is from God, right? Can I?
No, I get you.
Yeah. So like, it's just in terms of data points, there's nothing.
What I would say there though is that it's not some like certainty or like we're presuming a level of certainty that you can't achieve about anything.
You cannot have any level of certainty. I think it's all based on theory and faith, which I'm not like, great. We do that with like, I trust that that the sun's going to rise tomorrow. I don't know.
No,
Maybe.
dude, you trust all kinds of things. You trust
I know,
that the
there's
person who
better
built your
examples.
house did it right.
There's better
trust that
examples.
the person that worked your car. You trust that the person who fixed your car the other day did it the right way, and you're not going to be driving down the road and it's going to kill you because they did it wrong.
Here's the thing.
You put your faith in all kinds of things. You just refuse to do it. You put your faith
No,
in
wait.
all kinds of things that you don't understand.
Wait.
You just refuse to do it for God.
Wait, but in those instances, I can sue my mechanic for doing a bad job. So if God does a bad job, I don't know who that is. And there is no punitive response. And I can't actually have a conversation with God about the bad job.
Why
I can
not?
pray. Well, I can't hear him. He's not going to talk back.
You never heard God talk to you in prayer?
Not audibly. I have thoughts in my head. How do I distinguish?
Does your wife only communicate to you audibly?
No.
So why is it that God can only communicate to you audibly?
What are the other ways she communicates to me?
Can she not tell you all she's trying to tell you with one look?
So I can physically see her?
Oh, but in other ways, can you not like just sometimes feel when her presence is behind you?
Is her presence physically behind me when I feel it?
Sure, but you didn't know.
No, this analogy is totally broken.
No, it's not. Not in any kind of way.
No, it is. It is because she's a real human being. Okay, let me back up.
95% of the things that are communicated to you and anytime somebody speaks to you are not the words they're saying.
I see them visually. Right. They're nonverbal.
What about when you're on the phone?
Oh, there's like I can physically hear.
What I'm trying to show you is you've made a lot of loopholes for communication with humans that you don't allow God to also participate in.
God doesn't call me on the phone. Is it a problem that Cullen thinks that evil and good are both pre-existing, that they're both moved by, animated by, empowered by two opposing but equal powers? That's heresy.
That would be Manichaeism.
All right.
There we go. Everybody's a heretic at some point. We found it.
So
But you wouldn't say they're opposing in equal powers?
Yes.
Well, I would say that the biblical story has told me at every turn that God is more powerful.
But chooses not to
wins. But I would definitely say that they're equally pre-existent, but I'm not necessarily saying that they're equal in power because I don't know that. And also I know that every time God whoops his ass.
It seems like God loses a lot.
I don't think God ever loses.
I guess that's how we're defining evil, I guess, and what is caused by evil. If God causes... I guess
God's losses are when Israel rebels.
If God is the author of mass genocide, if he tells Joshua to kill all the babies and goats and women, the non-combatants.
I mean, to be fair, they never actually do it.
The walls don't crumble down on families?
Let me say
they
this.
Never actually kill everyone.
There is never a time of war throughout history except for when America goes to war to somewhere else that civilians are not involved.
Wait, what?
We have some crazy notion that wars, like people in the army go fight against other people in armies.
Yeah.
Every war in the history of the world has been fought in civilian areas.
Yeah.
And so we have some crazy notion that any war that involves civilians is like all wars up until, except for the U.S., has fought these wars on somebody else's civilian soil.
Right.
So we tend to think that's like when we read the text. So all that's to say is like, so then you have to ask this question: is every human interaction in that way, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just in the Old Testament.
But if God told him,
the story definitely tells that God said,
if it's under God's direct orders.
No, I just want to qualify this.
Okay.
That there's some kind of, we want to put that kind of war in some weird category, and it is the way that war has always existed.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's all bad. It's all bad.
Yeah.
So I don't like a God that tells people to go do it.
And I don't want to defend, because like the whole reasons we went into World War II were self-defense. It was not protection of the Jews or to
of course not
liberate the camps.
No.
Yeah.
But there are times
we didn't even know
where it seems better to have participated and stopped what was going on.
Oh, just war theory. Tune in next time and we'll discuss just war theory with an Anabaptist pacifist. Yeah.
Again, like I don't know when the justification for that would be achieved.
Yeah, right. That's
but
the
at
thing.
the same time, because I don't think we achieved it in that case, but I still and so it is those instances then that make me wonder about, well, what about then in the Old Testament?
Exactly.
I'm not a purist in the Anabaptist vision.
Gotcha. Okay, that's all the time we have. But my last question
Cullen
to
is
you.
apparently a heretic.
Cullen is a heretic.
Yes.
Because this idea that matter exists eternally and that there's these other principles have more to do with Plato than the Bible.
All right, he's a Platonist.
No,
he's
they
a
have more to do
Platonist
with me
heretic.
just reading the Bible.
Okay, look, we've only got a minute left. I just want to ask one last question. Do you miss us?
Yes.
In class, do you
miss us in class doing this? There were times where this man would tell me I was only allowed to speak 2 times per class. And I had a speaking ration, and I was not able, I had to be very strategic about my allotment and what comments I would make when.
Yeah.
So
and when we got put on speaking allotments, we would make notes in the margins of our books.
Yes.
To know when we were going to talk about, we were going to use our options.
No, we would stop him in the hallway afterwards and make him talk for an hour. So,
or just
I will say this, that I have not had the experience that we did from your cohort since that time.
No one is as pompous or as
outspoken. Well, and I think the other part is actually does all the work you assign.
That's true.
And can have.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. There's lots of people that have been good students, very life-giving and affirming, just as a professor. But
yeah.
It's when you have the spark of multiple people that build spark off one another.
Yeah.
And that confluence.
Shout out to Antonio, Dallas, Andre, Josh. Who else was in there? Derek.
Shaq Lee was in there.
All sorts of people. Anyways.
Paige Holden was in there.
All of our timers are about to cut off. Thanks so much for being here, but he'll be back on the next episode. And goodbye.